I'm Judy Zelina, and this is the Millcreek Government Channel. Thank you for tuning in today. Today we're going to be talking about an organization, the Sarah A. Reed Children's Center, which many of you may be familiar with, but we're going to be getting a little bit more in-depth on what they do for our community. The mission of the Sarah Reed Children's Center is to promote emotional well-being of children and families, helping them to realize their potential and experience success. They're leaders in behavioral health services. They strive to develop best practices in treatment methods through a culture of emotional intelligence, inquiry, continuous improvement, consistency, and social learning. Joining us today on the program to give some insight to the history and the future of the Children's Center, we have Gary Bukowski sitting right next to me. And Gary is the Associate Vice President of Development. Thank you for joining us, Gary.
Thank you for the invitation.
And also joining us, we have Dr. Adrian Dixon. And Dr. Dixon is the Associate Vice President of Residential Clinical Services and Community Support. I know you're busy, but we really appreciate you being on the program today.
Thank you for having us.
So first off, Gary, let's talk a little bit about how long you've been with the Children's Center and really what brought you to Sarah Reed.
Well, I'll tell you, I actually have been at Sarah Reed, probably one of the shorter durations. Certainly, my colleague to the left has got a lot of tenure there, but a little over a year now. Mm-hmm. And I think what really brought me there was, what I looked at, all the different dimensions of Sarah Reed, the kind of philosophy, mission, vision, and the fact that there was I felt a lot of opportunities to help it grow based on some of the skill sets that I felt I could bring to the organization if the organization wanted to use those skill sets.
Well, I'm sure they're glad to have you on board. And Dr. Dixon, what exactly is your role in the Sarah Reed family?
My role right now is to provide clinical and administrative support to the residential program and some of our community support programs that are housed at Sarah Reed Children's Center.
Okay, before we get into the different services that you provide and the different programs, let's go back a little bit and maybe talk about the history of Sarah Reed, because, boy, it's a rich history, isn't it?
Yes, very. Maybe say a few words because I could get carried away on the history because my background is history in a lot of ways. And the thing is that what's very important, especially in this year, because it's the 145th anniversary of the organization. And obviously that is an important benchmark in our community. And it's not something I feel that you can take lightly, because what it shows is, the fact of who got it started, the fact that there's been so much effort and work put into it to carry it on over this long period. There's not too many organizations, corporate organizations, that can say they're 145 years old. Right. So this says something. And being a nonprofit, that's another issue, because you don't have all of the resources to carry on some of the things. And the person who really kicked it off was a woman by the name of Sarah A. Reed in 1871. She had very much involvement with the community. She was the 8th of 8 children in the family. Her great-grandparents were Seth and Hannah Reed, who came from a sailing ship from Buffalo to Erie and became one of the first families to settle in Erie County and to the west of the city of Erie. Her great-grandfather, great-uncle, I should say, Rufus Reed, built a residence on, it would be State and 6th, which would later become one of the first locations of what they called the Home for the Friendless, which is the charity that Sarah would lead for over 60 years. Okay. 45 of those years, by the way, were when she served as the chairman of the board. So she was very involved in community service. She served on over 27 organizations. So she is what I would call a Renaissance woman. But along with her, she brought, and the more I research and the more people I have in the community that are helping me with the research, because a lot of this is right not at your fingertips. You can't go to Wikipedia to get this. So going back in time, she really banded together about 30 other women to help her to begin the care of homeless women and homeless children. And that started in 1871. Actually, the first admission was in November of that 1871. And it's very interesting, too, that as you get into this, and of course I get into numbers a little, but at that time I found in the old annals that the cost at that time that it cost to provide care to a child per week was $1.46 and a half of a cent. It was very interesting the way they put it in. And the kids were called inmates. Now that wouldn't fly too well because obviously these kids were not inmates, they were homeless children. And the fact is that many of them were there with their mothers to take care of, so the mother could go out, try to find a job, and then the concept at that time was then to move away, and then they would no longer be within that.
So it basically started as an organization for homeless children and homeless women. So that was the whole basis.
In the beginning.
Okay, that's where it started, and this is where it ends up. Wow, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes over the last 145 years.
Okay, now it started as this. Now, Dr. Dixon, changes in your different programs and services sort of evolved through this time. About when did you start recognizing that there were some emotional problems that you could probably help with and work with?
I think in the early 70s, it became very clear that some of the children who were coming into the facility had some particular needs, and that the focus of what was being provided or the needs of what needed to be provided to these youngsters really went beyond just taking care of them and addressing some minor behaviors. And so, very early on, by the late 70s, it became very clear that we needed to specialize in mental health services and to ensure that kids coming in were going to get the appropriate support systems, meaning, clinical resources that were needed as they were enrolled in the program.
And this is where you started recognizing these behavioral problems or patterns, whereas years ago it was just they were labeled as bad kids. And that's where you guys looked and just started separating the layers.
Right. I think that early on there was a mixture of children who came into the organization, and back then the residential program, because that was the primary service that was provided. And so there were kids that might have been involved in multi-level systems, and including who might have had some incorrigible behaviors, but certainly had mental health or emotional needs. And then also we had children involved in our organization who had intellectual disabilities. So there was, Sarah Reed provided a very wide context of services early on.
Okay. Now, Gary, how many children have you served?
Well, it would be sort of hard to say how many we've served. Obviously, thousands over this period of time. Presently, we serve roughly 1,700 with their families. Wow. And of course, in some of those cases, and you could tell me better than anyone, you're trying to always work the children with their family. But in some cases, the family is dysfunctional. And it's very different. But over 1,700, and the children that we get, many of them obviously are from Erie County. But I know in the residential service, just to mention that, because I was astounded when I looked at the 4 residential cottages, and I said, give me a snapshot of where the children are coming from.
That's what I wanted to ask you. And you don't just serve Erie County, do you?
No, mostly it is, but we actually, the last snapshot I took about a month or two ago, when I talked with our admissions person, we have children coming in from 20 different counties throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in our residence program.
Okay.
So that's pretty diverse. In fact, I think a lot of people are shocked at how many, because that we can stretch all the way to the far east of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Actually, I met a young man the other day from Berks, was coming in the door.
Really?
Yeah. It seemed like a very sharp young man.
Wide range, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Now, what ages do you serve?
We serve as young as 5 years old to 18 in a residential facility, and of course we have other services that are located at different campuses for our organization that might serve even younger. You know, for example, as young as 3 years old, and I believe 2 beginning for our therapeutic daycare program.
Okay.
So we really have a wide range of ages that we provide services to, and the type of service or the level of service that we provide.
Which tells me you need a large staff. Approximately, how many do you have on staff right now?
Well, by the last count, about 350 individuals, and of course, some of that is pieced together part-time.
Right.
You have well, like in residence, you have 3 shifts, so you can't have one person serving 24 hours.
And you've got the different age groups. As I'm
Right.
listening to you, so
yeah.
you've got different needs that need to be met with each age group.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about some of the different programs that you have in place, but one that I find very, very interesting, and I think Dr. Dixon, this is the program that you work with, is called the Sanctuary Model. What does that entail?
Yeah, Sanctuary is actually an organizational model. So one of the things that we found many years ago is that many of the kids that were coming to our facility had a great deal of trauma in their history.
Okay.
And we knew that we were doing this trauma work and working with kids and families and helping them to begin to address the trauma so that they could have a more quality life experience. And in that, we started to do some work or some research about what kinds of treatments, what kinds of services existed when working with this population. And what we found was a model that helped us understand clinically what we needed to do, which was, trauma-informed care. And we were very interested in a gentleman, a psychologist by the name of John Briere, who really had started to do a great deal of research in this. Okay. And following John Briere, we also became very familiar with a psychiatrist named Sandra Bloom, who developed the Sanctuary model. And trauma-informed care fits very nicely with Sanctuary, because Sanctuary is an organizational model. What it is it really talks about how the organization functions and what are some of the values and principles that that organization possesses in terms of being able to service appropriately the clientele that they're working with. And that really does start with how the organization functions, how they relate to their own employees, and then what that parallel process looks like from the organization to the employees, from the employees to the client population. So things like, and you mentioned them earlier when you started out talking about our vision statement, things like nonviolence, open communication, social justice, social responsibility are those core pillars of Sanctuary that we really embrace in our organization, that is important for us in terms of how we see ourselves, how we relate to one another, how we conduct business, and then how we provide effective treatment.
So it's the whole package.
It's the whole package, yeah.
I guess I didn't realize that it was a program that you adopted, and you're working with.
Right.
In Sarah Reed.
And again, since I'm the newbie on dealing with Sanctuary, I was impressed with what I saw, because I've seen it just in 1 year, and how it's infused through all the programs, the people. Yesterday they had a 3-hour get-together for everybody as we move into the next year.
Okay.
All of the different cottages were represented, all of the different campuses were represented, and all tying into the Sanctuary model. And it's not so much the model, but it's like the belief and how it's infused into everyone, because it also sets up a whole what I call philosophical model that we can live by. And I've seen a lot of nonprofits, and they don't all operate that way. And I think there's a lot of collegiality that's really collegiality, not on the books or in
Right.
the PR pieces, because that means a lot, because you can always tell. And that's when that really kicks in. And just with the kids, quite frankly, one thing when I walk through the area where we do the teaching of the children and from the various residents, I've never seen so many kids as you pass in front of them that say, "Excuse me." I dealt with college kids for many years. I never had too much of that. And they were a lot older. These kids are much younger. So there's a whole esprit de corps in a way that is being sort of put in, from my observation at least, everywhere through the organization.
Well, it just goes to show how close you work with these children, and you're giving them a feeling of self-esteem, you know, and pride in what they do. Now, you have a lot of different services. Like one is the residential treatment services. Now, that is where they actually stay on a campus. Okay.
Yes.
How does that? First off, okay, I want to go back just a little bit here. How do any of the children get referred to your programs?
Right. Referral process typically happens from our admissions team. So usually there may be some community teams that's working with this child or family that recognize a need that child can no longer be safe in their home communities or safe in their home, that this child is, you know, already exhausted multiple levels of service within the community, and then are referred to us. However, you know, a child's parent can call us and refer.
Oh, okay.
You know, anyone can call and make the referral. I think there are a number of pieces, obviously, that need to be in place. And so because we have such a large continuum with the organization, it looks a little different at each level. So outpatient services is, you know, one of those services that is least restrictive in our community. So obviously a parent can call up, can make that referral directly, and be able to access those services. Something like residential treatment, being the most restrictive, we want to ensure that they've exhausted all of those other community supports. And so things like having an evaluation, a psychiatric evaluation that has really identified the medical necessity for that, because even though it's a needed service, these are still kids. And so we want to ensure that we've done everything prior to coming there before that child is admitted into our program. And again, that each campus or each level of service would have their own intake or admissions person, from outpatient to our partial hospitalization services. Those are all community-based.
Okay.
And then the residential, obviously, is a resident program, meaning that they actually stay on campus. They
will actually stay on campus. But they've usually, if they're in your residential program, this is where, through intake and through interview and talking with them, you have realized this is the safest, most
therapeutic is what I would say, yeah.
Direction that you can give this child.
Right. It's it's an environment where they can receive the treatment that's needed. They're going to address those behavioral and emotional needs. There's an opportunity to work with the families, but also to keep them in an environment that's safe and that they're able, and there's trained people that can respond to that. You know, if we could take our staff and put them in a home, then obviously they would be able to stay there, but we can't do that. So being on campus is the safest option for them at that time.
Now you also have outpatient programs too.
So our outpatient programs is what you would think of as traditional outpatient, meaning there's an emotional or clinical need. The child and or family go on an outpatient basis to see their therapist, to see the psychiatrist, and to address those needs. That can be expanded to our partial programs, which is pretty much what it says, partial hospitalization, meaning that they're receiving the level of service as if they were in a hospital, but they don't need to stay or remain. So they go daily to and from that program and receive things like therapy, group work, and then also any psychiatric needs that may need to be addressed during that time.
Now, you guys, you're all. Your arm reaches through the state of Pennsylvania, but I'm going to talk about the different campuses. I was so surprised when I heard really how many facilities, how many campuses that you have. Plus, you're working to expand more, right, Gary? First off, where was the first one? When Sarah Reed first started, where was the first?
The first one. Since I wasn't there, I don't want to make an error.
Well, you read.
It was definitely downtown, and actually, it seemed like there was a lot of synergy that occurred right around State originally. Then it seemed to move up Sassafras to where presently you have the Sarah Reed Retirement Home.
Okay.
Because when that change occurred, you had a movement where you had Sarah Reed Retirement Home and Sarah Reed Children's Home.
Okay.
Both having their own board of trustees,
Right.
developing their own 501c3s. And then, of course, a lot of that retirement home and all of its development stayed in that area. Because as I recall, there was actually a children's piece there. But then as time went on, they had to make changes. They tore that down. They wanted to expand the retirement home. So that really was their sort of presence, which is still there today. In fact, they're in the process of doing expansion right now. So that's even more astounding when you think of what this woman in the band of 30 started.
Yes.
Because it's far-reaching what happened, and I'm quite sure not everybody visioned that at the time.
And then you purchased property in Millcreek. They
Purchased Millcreek, right, 6.5 acres, and in fact, that's when things were changing, and we were getting, and I wasn't there at the time, but that's going back to 78, but actually 61, when they actually purchased that property. But that was where we are presently with the residence hall.
Okay.
At that time, it was 2 cottages. I think it was Gifford and Selden that became the names, and that was really the start right there in Millcreek. And then, of course, there were other campuses that had developed and evolved. There was the purchase of the Sarah Reed. There was a purchase of the Sarah. At that time, it was really St. Anne's on 10th and East Avenue, where we're located. Then we're on the Bayfront. Then we're, of course, our involvement on Oliver Road, professional building. Then at the old Hamilton School building that was owned by the school district, where we have over 130, 150 children right now. Actually, that's going to be the new area that we're looking at putting in a health clinic that's tied into primary health care that will serve those children, hopefully their parents and the people in the area.
We were talking about that. That is so amazing.
And that's a big expansion.
What a beautiful campus that's going to be.
Yeah, because I mean, you've got 7 acres there already, and I call it, I think when it's done, it'll be a small central park in the west side of Veery to really help people. And a lot of those children are coming from some of the most challenged areas in our community.
Right.
They're not just coming from down the street. They're bringing them there to really get a lot of help. And then we're going to build a sanctuary park immediately to the east of that. And therefore, our kids will use it during the day, and then it will become community-oriented, because once they leave, the other children in the neighborhood can use it, as well as the other folks, and then hopefully tying in some health programs within that primary health care network, because that's going to be a 16,000-foot facility.
What I like is when you were talking about it and showing the pictures, it was like it was a campus. It's not like a fence, and they are secluded and kept away from everybody around there, and everybody in the surrounding area isn't able to utilize it. I think it's a beautiful concept.
Yeah. Well, in fact, when I was trying to get some funding from the state, I had to bring up to them, I said, I just want you to know, we don't have teams, but all those other children that are playing there are from the neighborhood and from Blessed Sacrament and down here and everywhere, and we have an open arena. So, you know, we're community oriented.
Well, our time is getting to an end, but we could certainly, we still have a lot to talk about, but really what I'd like to do right now is, you provide such a wonderful service to the community. How could we as a community give back and help you?
I think that there are so many different ways. We certainly always welcome folks who want to volunteer, who are willing to come and support our agency that way. We have been incredibly, I think, had great opportunity and support from the community at our fundraisers, things like our Super Bowl that we've hosted. So we're always
That's a great fundraiser,
it is.
too.
It's great soup. The community comes out. Really, the restaurants, the local restaurants are wonderful in participating in that. So being able to participate and support our events there when our annual campaign comes out, we certainly would welcome even, donations, monetary donations. The community is often so kind to us. We've had folks who will just show up and say, hey, I bought winter hats for the kids or gloves for the kids. Right. Or, here's a donation to go purchase games for the kids. So I think that our community has in the past been very supportive. We welcome that continued support in terms of people showing up as volunteers or even monetarily.
So the bottom line, every little bit helps.
Every little bit helps, absolutely.
Now, if someone wants to get a little bit more information on your organization or even find different ways to volunteer, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, they can obviously go to our website. They can certainly contact me. I'm there. And just, we certainly would follow up. And to add to what Dr. Dixon said, I look at the 145th as a time really to bring some of the alumni, which is very difficult for us to do because of HIPAA. So we've been really raising the bar on the annual fund, major gifts, planned gifts. In fact, we've set up the Sarah A. Reed Legacy Society to develop planned gifts for the future of the organization, because obviously we've been here for 145. I think most of us feel we won't be here, but for the next 145. And you have to have the financial support, and it's usually through private philanthropy that can make a difference. So anybody wants to talk about any of those things, feel free to contact me, and I will be glad to give you a tour and articulate the needs. We have plenty of needs, believe me.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. And again, getting the word out, letting the residents know exactly how Sarah Reed has grown in these 145 years. Viewers, if you would like to get more information, check out the website. The Children's Center also has a Facebook page, and I was looking at it. It's really interesting, little tidbits like the chalk walk, on the Erie days they did. So anyhow, again, give them a call if you want to volunteer. Again, thank you for joining us. Viewers, thank you for tuning into the Millcreek Government Channel. Until next time, have a wonderful day.
You're watching the Millcreek Government Channel, powered by WQLN Public Media.